Hello everyone, welcome back to the StudyTube project. I'm Laur and I am currently a media student. I thought I would do a video on photography today because we're all in isolation, we all need something to do. So photography is an amazing hobby, amazing creative outlet, so I thought I would teach you the basics. Okay, so to start, I'm going to be labeling a camera for anybody who hasn't used a DSLR or something similar before. Now, I am going to be labeling my Canon 70D. Every single camera is obviously very different. I'm just labeling the features that go across different cameras. So there might be more specific features on higher model cameras, but I'm just going with the basics, okay? Shutter button. This is used to release the shutter and take the photo. These buttons can be pressed fully and also halfway for autofocus. Red eye reduction / self-timer lamp. With using self-timer on this, the lamp will flicker for the duration of the timer until the picture is taken. Lens mount. This is how you connect the interchangeable lens to the camera body. Lens mount index. On Canon cameras there are two indexes, a red circle and a white square. The red are for EF lenses and the white are for EFS lenses. These correspond to the marks on the lens. As I said, obviously every single camera brand is different, but that's what's on my camera. Lens release button. You can press this button to turn the lens, remove it and replace it with a different lens. The mirror. Now, if you have a mirrorless camera, as the name suggests, there isn't one, but if you do have a DSLR, the light is reflected from the lens into the viewfinder, which allows you to see the shot you are taking in real time. The flash. Now, obviously this is to be used in low light situations, which mean that you need or require a flash. The focus mode switch obviously allows you to change between manual focus and autofocus. The zoom ring allows you to alter the focal length. The focus ring allows you to adjust your manual focus. The hot shoe allows you to attach external flashes or microphones. The mode dial allows you to select a shooting mode. Different cameras have different modes, so I won't go into too much depth here. The viewfinder eyepiece allows you to look through and compose your photo. The LCD monitor allows you to see the shooting settings as well as the menu. With some cameras you can actually adjust the eyepiece to the LCD screen so you can see it a little bit bigger. The menu button allows you to change the camera settings as desired. The playback button allows you to view the images you've taken on the LCD monitor. The info button on the camera allows you to adjust what settings are available to see on the LCD screen. The quick control button can be altered in settings, but it basically allows you to confirm different settings at one glance. The erase button, as you can probably imagine, allows you to remove unwanted images. And finally, the focus point selection button allows you to manually select autofocus points. Okay, so now we move on to the settings on the quick control screen. First we have the shooting mode. I have mine set to manual. We then have shutter speed, aperture and ISO. Below we have the exposure meter, we have image effects, white balance, custom controls, autofocus information, drive mode, metering mode, image quality, and then finally battery level. And breathe. I hope that was helpful in some way. I know I went through it very fast, so I hope you kept up all right. Moving on, I'm going to talk about common terminology that's used in photography that is very, very important. Up first is exposure. Now, exposure in simple terms means how bright or dark the photograph is, which might seem pretty self-explanatory and simple to achieve, but lighting is something that photographers struggle with all the time. Due to the sun and weather, lighting can change literally in an instant, so it is essential for photographers that they know how to adjust their settings to match the lighting environment. Exposure uses aperture, shutter speed and ISO to create a properly exposed image. So, what is aperture? Aperture is the size of the opening in the lens that allows light to travel to the camera body, therefore meaning the larger the aperture, the more light that is able to pass through. If you've done any form of camera before, you'll probably be familiar with f-stops. On screen you can see a scale of the f-stops. On the left you can see f1.4 and on the right you can see f22. As we move left to right, the exposure closes, meaning that less light is passing through the lens. This increases the depth of field. So what is depth of field, you may ask? Depth of field is the distance or zone between the closest and farthest objects in a photo that appears sharp. Your camera can only focus sharply at one point, so having a shallow depth of field allows for a small specific part of the image to be in focus. You might remember that having a wide aperture allows for a shallow depth of field, meaning it is more suited towards portraits or macro shooting. On the other hand, here we have an aperture such as f32 or f22. This aperture is more suited towards group photos or landscapes, as the depth of field is deep, allowing for more of the zone to be in focus. Earlier I mentioned that exposure consists of aperture, shutter speed and ISO. So what is ISO? ISO is simply the level of sensitivity your camera has to the light the aperture is letting in. The lower the ISO number, the less sensitive to light, and vice versa. On screen again, you can see two photos. The photo on the left is taken with a low ISO and the photo on the right is taken with a high ISO. Last up, in regards to exposure, we have shutter speed. Now, shutter speed is the length of time a camera shutter is open to expose light into the camera sensor. For example, if the shutter speed is fast, it can freeze the action. So this is commonly used in wildlife photography or sports photography, and a fast shutter speed will allow less light in as the window of time is shorter. And vice versa, with a slow shutter speed, more light will be let in as there is more time for that light to be entered into the camera. On screen you can see two photos. The left is with a fast shutter speed and the right is with a slow shutter speed. Now, you might have heard the term white balance before. White balance is the colour temperature in your image. As you can see with the scale on the screen, this ranges from cool blue toned colour temperatures to warmer orange tones. You can also see the difference on screen now between the in-camera presets. Most cameras come with these presets for beginner or intermediate photographers who are starting to learn about white balance. Most photographers will use custom white balance when they are shooting. White balance is so important within photography, so to show this I have another comparison, ladies and gentlemen. On the left we have a cool toned white balance and on the right we have a warm toned white balance. Now, of course, in some cases you can sort it all out in post-production and editing. However, it's just best that you get it right in production, to be honest. It makes your life so much easier. Okay, so now that I've covered the basics, I'm going to move into some terms that are very useful if you are starting out with photography. First up, we have aspect ratio. This is the ratio of image height to image width. For example, if you were to have two photos, a 4:5 photo and a 4:7 photo, it is clear that the second image is wider than the first. On the other hand, if you had a 4:5 image and an 8:10 image, these have the same aspect ratio but are just different sizes. File format. This is something that a lot of people question when they start photography. Should I shoot JPEG or should I shoot RAW? The difference between the two, simply, is that RAW files contain a lot more information than JPEG files, which is why most photographers shoot in RAW. Due to the fact that they can contain more information, they are more suitable for versatile editing, which is obviously a massive part of modern photography. If you're just starting out, I would say JPEG is absolutely fine to start out with, and it can be used across so many different platforms, whereas RAW usually cannot as much. So I would say start with JPEG and then you can always move up to RAW in the future. Long exposure. Now, you may remember earlier in this video I talked about shutter speeds. Long exposure is when an image has been exposed for a long amount of time and uses a slow shutter speed. On screen are some ways that this can be used for artistic effect. Noise/grain, aka the bane of a photographer's life. This is something that a lot of people are familiar with now. It is basically the little flecks in an image which may compromise the quality or the editing ability. Noise usually occurs due to high ISO usage, which is why it's best to use the lowest ISO you can if possible. Burst mode. This can be adjusted on your camera, but burst mode is when the camera will continue to take photos as you're holding the shutter down. This gives you a wide selection of photos when you come to editing. This is commonly used in action-based photos such as sports or wildlife photography. Bokeh. Now, earlier I mentioned a shallow depth of field. This is usually where bokeh occurs the most. Bokeh is the orbs created when lights are out of focus in an image. Think 2013 Tumblr and Pinterest days. You know it. These are usually better with a shallow depth of field. As I said, it's very aesthetically pleasing. You can see on screen a few examples. Okay, so this is where I'm going to leave today's video. If you would like to see more specific topics within photography, do let me know, or media in general, to be honest. I do a bit of everything. If you'd like to see more content from me, my YouTube is just Laur Medley. I will link that below with my social medias and my podcast, so go have a watch if you want to. Anyway, we will see you very, very soon with another video. Bye!